Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would give my little fight review and my fight breakdowns of the UFC 299 card. I kind of want to make my video a little bit longer, and I wanted to kind of, talk through a video overall where other people were breaking it down as well. Maybe Joe Rogan or something like that to make it a little bit more interesting. But unfortunately, I couldn't really find any good enough footage overall that I just saw would be good enough, to make a video out of it. So, I'm just pretty much going to talk through it myself here and tell you what I ended up seeing throughout some of the fights here, especially, of course, throughout the main event between that of Sugar Show, Sean O'Malley, and that of Marlon Chito Vera. Of course, for those of you that did not know this was a rematch overall, because the first fight happened, I believe, about 2 or 3 years ago, and it has been the only loss in Sugar Sean O'Malley's career, at least overall the first fight. And for those of you that did not end up overall hearing about the fight, Sugar Sean O'Malley ended up completely kicking Marlon Chito Vera's ass, which, I'm not really super surprised about, but I'll tell you why here in a couple minutes. But this was a rematch because in the first fight, I believe that Marlon Chito Vera didn't just get the win, but he ended up getting the stoppage. And I think that he ended up kicking, either Sugar Sean O'Malley's legs to the point to where Sugar Show couldn't continue onwards, or he got the right kick in there to where it hit a nerve, and Sugar Show unfortunately just really couldn't continue. And I'm not going to state that Chito Vera ended up getting lucky in that fight necessarily, and that's the reason overall why he kind of continued onward. But what I will say is that overall, I think that he caught Sean probably at a place to where he needed a little bit of improvement. And to be honest with you, I think that that loss, whether you think that Marlon Chito Vera ended up getting lucky in that fight or not, overall, I think that it helped Sugar Show's career. I think it helped out his striking a little bit. I think it helped out his patience. I think it helped out overall, his intelligence as a fighter. And also him, of course, being able to defend some of those leg kicks because, before that, in that fight, he was getting hit, I believe, with some good leg kicks by that of Marlon Chito Vera, at least from what I remember. Now I could be wrong. It's been a while since I kind of watched that fight, but Sugar Show once again in this fight, just to talk about it, Sugar Sean O'Malley completely dominated Chito Vera pretty much from round 1 to round 5. He dominated him from pillar to post, which I'm not really super surprised about because Sugar Sean O'Malley, in my view, is a very good striker. And it's no offense against Marlon Chito Vera, but pretty much every single time that I've seen him in the octagon, even though allegedly he's a black belt, in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, I've never really seen him use it before. What he mainly likes to do is come forward and plod forward and pretty much keep his hands up the whole entire time. No head movement whatsoever. Not in super intelligent combination striking. Marlon Chito Vera is a relatively one-dimensional fighter in my view. He's a guy that pretty much is going to plod forward. He's a very dangerous striker, and he's a very dangerous brawler if you're able to get with him. And he's a relatively intelligent counterpuncher when he can be, especially when you're up against the fence. But Marlon Chito Vera is not the most intelligent fighter out there. He's not the most multi-dimensional fighter. What he pretty much does is wait for an opening or wait for you to get pretty much up against the cage, and he throws 1 or 2 shots at a time, usually one major shot at a time. And I don't care whether you're in boxing, I don't care whether you're in mixed martial arts, I don't care what combat sport you're in. When you end up only throwing 1 or 2 punches at a time, especially one punch at a time or one strike at a time, you're not going to end up winning that fight. Because what all the elite champions know is that you have to throw in combination. That's something also that my father taught me when I trained a little bit, at least in boxing as I grew up a little bit. And my father trained a little bit in boxing and taekwondo. You always have to throw everything in combination. If you keep throwing strikes from left field or if you keep looking for that good one solid punch, then you're going to get completely outboxed or you're going to just get completely outfought. It just is what it is because you can't just look for that solid one shot all the time. And that's why, even in boxing, when it comes down to it, fighters like Deontay Wilder and George Foreman, some guys that are looking for that one hitter quitter, like, some of their fans always say that, oh, well, everyone says that they need this great technique, but they're stopping everybody, this whole stuff. It's like, well, yeah, that's great, but wait until you get in the ring with a guy that can truly out-technique you, a guy overall that can truly outbox you or outdo you. And that is the most important thing. That is the most important overall asset when it comes to that of a fighter or just, someone competing really in general. That's really the most important thing, in my view, in general anyway, no matter what it comes to, is intelligence or creativity, or being able to create something with your mind when it comes down to it. That comes partially with creativity. That also comes partially with intelligence. And then some could say, of course, that, creativity comes with intelligence. But, Overall, that depends on the person, I suppose, that you ask. But when it comes down to, once again, Sugar Sean O'Malley was able to completely outbox Marlon Chito Vera overall from round 1 to round 5. He was very good with his jab. He was very good with his feet. Marlon Chito Vera is not a quick-footed fighter. He's not a guy overall, once again, that's going to throw a whole lot. He's a brawler. He's a guy overall, once again, that's, he's like a tactical brawler. He's a guy, once again, that tries to hunt you down and pretty much overall get you with that one good shot. That pretty much is what Marlon Chito is like. Or if he can break you down up against the fence, then that's what he's going to do. But if you're able to move around him relatively well, and if you're able to stay out of some of his kicking range and, stay out of his grappling range or stay out of some of his strikes, he doesn't really have much more than that. And Sugar Sean O'Malley overall proved my point exactly correct overall in this fight, because he ended up teeing off on him pretty much the whole entire time. He couldn't get past the jab. He couldn't get past the right hand. He couldn't get past the left hand. There was nothing that he could do. And Sugar Sean O'Malley did a very great job using the angles. And once again, you can tell that Sugar Sean O'Malley, once again, has great boxing experience. Because, once again, and, me and my friend, we always kind of debate about it, because I was trained more in boxing as I grew up. And, he was, he eventually got more into Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu as of recent. And he always stated recently that he believes that, boxing, he believes that it's kind of fake and that, it's not really that useful of a martial art. Well, if you're talking about, once again, just a pure boxer or someone that is just using their hands in a street fight, and, overall, if you're going to face someone like Khabib Nurmagomedov, someone that not only has striking but also great grappling ability, then yeah, the boxing ability is going to be nowhere near as useful as what it can be. But if you're talking about also a legitimate MMA fighter, boxing also is a great asset, and Sugar Sean O'Malley overall is a great example of that. Now, is his grappling probably as great, as a Khabib Nurmagomedov's, or, someone overall like a Daniel Cormier or an Islam Makhachev? No, it's not probably as great as that, but he has great takedown defense. And that's why I say, when you meet a fighter overall, once again, that is a great wrestler and a great Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu artist, those guys are great as well. But, when they finally meet a guy that can finally defend those takedowns, when it comes down to it, then sometimes when they meet, someone that actually has some boxing ability, it can become a problem. Now, the thing is with the UFC is that a lot of these wrestlers and a lot of these ground game guys, they overall usually are so dominant to the point overall to where that boxing ability usually doesn't matter. So in my view, if you wanted to debate that maybe that ground game, is potentially more dangerous than that of the boxing ability, you certainly could. But, basically what my main point is overall is that in MMA, or really, if you're just trying to learn the martial arts in general, boxing is a very important tool to use as well, because in terms of hand-to-hand combat, which is pretty much where the fight always starts in the first place, and if you're not able to reach your opponent, boxing ability is always great to learn. And boxing, once again, when it comes to hand-to-hand combat, there's no better hand-to-hand combat practitioners than that of boxers. It just is what it is. All right. Once again, they teach you to throw a certain way. They teach you overall to not, once again, advertise your punches. The punches are usually very straight and they shift a decent amount of weight into them. They show you overall, once again, how to move with your hips and overall how to move with your legs to put the most amount of power and weight within your punches. They also teach you how to use your feet and your legs when it comes down to it. In MMA, of course, you have to be a little bit different, but that's a big part of the reason overall why Sugar Sean O'Malley also won this fight. He's a very decent boxer, at least for that of an MMA fighter. Now, Sugar Sean O'Malley apparently overall called out Ilia Topuria in this fight, and that would be a very interesting fight. That would actually be a super fight. I would still like to see Sugar Sean O'Malley potentially remain at the 135-pound weight class, but if he fought that of Ilia Topuria at the 145-pound weight class, which I assume is where it would be, I don't see Ilia Topuria coming down to 135 or it being at a catch weight. I think Sugar Sean O'Malley, of course, would want to become a dual-wield champ, or a double champ at that of the 145-pound weight class. That's what I think overall that he would try to do, and that would be a very interesting fight. But Ilia Topuria, let me tell you what, that kid is nothing to mess around with. I said that for the Alexander Volkanovski fight. I ended up being correct that at least he would be a humongous threat, that he was going to be the biggest threat that Alexander Volkanovski was ever going to fight at the 145-pound weight class when it came down to it, at least in terms of talent, and I was correct. Ilia Topuria, and my friend actually, he stated that he believes that Sugar Sean O'Malley might be the best striker, at least in terms of all of MMA. And maybe one could debate that, at least when you talk about hand-to-hand combat. He's also very good with his legs. He attacked his legs very early on, and Chito Vera is not a guy, once again, that checks a lot of leg kicks, at least from what I've seen. And on top of that, like I said, he's not a super maneuverable guy. So Sugar Sean O'Malley did what he was supposed to do in this fight, and he did it in dominant fashion. But once again, that Aaliyah Taporia fight would be very interesting. But my friend, like I stated, he said that he believes that Sugar Sean O'Malley might actually be the best striker in all of MMA, or at least in the UFC. And, that could potentially be true. That very well could potentially be true. Right now, I would say, at least in terms of boxing, that Aaliyah Taporia is probably the best all-around boxer that I've seen in the whole entire UFC. But you have some other guys that are very great boxers as well. Sugar Sean O'Malley is one of those guys. Dustin Poirier, by the way, who of course is on the card as well, he's another one of those guys as well. And he fought that one Frenchman, I believe, Saint Denis, I believe his name was. He was kind of getting out grappled within that fight, but of course he was able to survive it. Dustin Poirier going for his regular 82 guillotine attempts and not landing a single one of them when it comes down to it. But Dustin Poirier, when it comes down to it, he's an amazing boxer as well, at least for an MMA fighter. And of course, it was only a matter of time before St. Denis got caught because he was coming in way too straightforward and he kept his hands down. And he has some striking ability, of course. He's known as a knockout artist, but I'll give Dustin Poirier, once again, a lot of credit because, or Poirier, however you pronounce his name. I believe that it's Poirier, but I could be wrong about that. Someone correct me. I've had certain people tell me that it's pronounced in different ways, but I believe it's Poirier. But anyways, Dustin's been one of my favorite fighters over to watch for a very long time. He's an excellent striker. He's very good on the ground when he has to be. But what I will say about Dustin is that he did look old in this fight. He definitely did not look like quite the same fighter. He looked like a fighter that had lost his step. And to be honest with you, he's kind of looked like that within his past couple of fights. He looked like he lost his step in that of the Michael Chandler fight, who I believe, by the way, is the most overrated 155-pounder. And it has been ever since that he's been there, although he is relatively talented. He definitely looked like he lost his step against Justin Gaethje, at least in terms of the fight game plan. He did not fight as intelligently, in my view, as what he could have. But Dustin Poirier winning this one, of course, it's a great win because Saint Denis was a huge, huge threat to that weight class. He was coming off, I believe, of 5 stoppages within that weight class, and over some decent guys. So the fact that Dustin Poirier, the fact that he was eventually able to get him, once again, also speaks to his boxing ability and overall Dustin's patience. And, Dustin's story is really so very particularly interesting because for those of you that remember back in the day, Dustin Poirier was pretty much remembered by getting knocked out and stopped by everybody that pretty much he ever fought that was elite. When he was at the 145-pound weight class, I believe that he got stopped by Chen Song Jung, or at least, beaten by him. He got beat by Cub Swanson. He got knocked out by Conor McGregor when it came down to it. And then at 155, he was kind of, having a great streak there. And then he got knocked out by that of Michael Johnson, who pretty much has been known as a gatekeeper throughout his whole entire career. And after I seen that knockout, I thought for sure that Dustin Poirier, I said, you know what, I like this fighter, but for whatever reason, he just can't seem to step it up whenever he needs to in out of the big fights. So just sum up with this guy, and on top of that, his chin seems to be a little bit shaky. He loses confidence. But Dustin Poirier, give all the credit in the world to him because after that, I remember when the Eddie Alvarez fight was set up and I said, oh man, Eddie Alvarez is going to kill this dude. This fight is not even going to be that close. And then I remember that fight and Dustin, Poirier, he actually was kicking Eddie Alvarez's ass. And Eddie has never been overall the most supreme striker in the world. He's a very big brawler with his strikes being very wide and very advertised. But Dustin Poirier, I remember that fight just like it was yesterday. And Eddie, of course, landed that dirty-ass knee in that first fight. And then in the second fight, he was still pulling some dirty-ass moves as well. But I remember Dustin Poirier. I remember him going on that streak just like it was yesterday. I give Dustin Poirier a lot of credit. And if he never ends up winning the official title at 155 pounds, he definitely, in my view, is going to go down as one of the greatest, and some may even debate the greatest, to potentially overall never win a title, or at least the official title. Dustin Poirier is an extraordinarily skilled fighter. And I remember when he was beating guys like Eddie Alvarez, Max Holloway, Anthony Pettis, even though he was a little bit more wore down in his career. Of course, beat Conor McGregor in the final 2 when it came down to it. Beat the hell out of Max Holloway in that rematch, who in my view is one of the more overrated strikers, in my view, in the UFC, although he's still a great fighter, and beat some other guys. Dustin Poirier definitely is a great fighter, but in my view, you can tell that, at the age of 35, that a lot of wear and tear has been on him. You can tell that he's starting to lose a little bit of those steps as a fighter, in my view. He looks slower. He looks a little bit older when it comes down to it. The power is still there, but as I always say, the power is the last thing to go. So we'll see about that. As for Michael Venom Page, he ended up winning his fight against Kevin Holland, which is pretty much what I predicted. Michael Venom Page is a decent striker. He, in my view, is a little bit too showboaty for, my taste. He seems to be a funny guy, but, Michael Venom Page, in my view, he really needs to try to keep his hands up, because if he does that shit against elite level fighters, he's going to get canned. And I believe that has happened once or twice in his career as well, where he ended up getting knocked out. So Michael Venom Page has to be a little bit careful about that. But I pretty much predicted him to beat Kevin Holland, because Kevin Holland, and some may even say, who knows, maybe even through the fight, I don't know. But Kevin Holland is a guy that every time I've seen him, I've just never really been super impressed with him. His striking is okay, but it's always been very wild and very unorthodox, very sloppy. He is a guy that I think that if he can't really use his size against you, or if he can't really use his grappling ability, which is relatively good, he's not mainly going to win that fight. And that's why pretty much every single time that he's been in an elite fight, he's pretty much lost. It just is what it is. As for, overall, for the rest of the analyzation for that fight, though, Kevin Holland, I will say this, he definitely looked like he could have been trying a little bit harder in that fight. I'm not sure if Dana White gave him a paycheck behind the scenes to basically say overall, hey, listen, we need this guy overall to, to go up, and you're gonna see an extra, 3 G's, when it comes, or you're gonna see an extra, 300, G's when it comes down to the overall in your bank account tomorrow if you let this happen. And some people overall, when I say stuff like that, they're like, oh, you're crazy. Stuff like that does happen in both the UFC and also in that of boxing. Certain guys overall, they do take a paycheck. They do take that because the UFC or boxing needs this guy to be promoted. But I'm not going to quite say that. I'm not going to quite allege that, because I don't have enough evidence, or I don't really have enough to say that. But Kevin Holland, he's just a fighter that, in my view, that every time he pretty much needs to step up to the plate. There's some fights that he wins, but most of the time when it's an elite fighter, he's not going to win that fight. It just is what it is. But he's a very nice guy, and he's a scrappy guy, so I give him credit for that. As for some of the other fights, that one fighter I believe that, ended up knocking out Gilbert Burns, I'm not really super surprised about that. Both of those guys are dangerous fighters. Gilbert Burns, very dangerous fighter, dangerous striker, dangerous grappler as well. But in terms of his striking ability, once again, when you're competing against guys, if you're going to be competing against an elite level striker, your grappling better be on the Khabib Nurmagomedov or Kamaru Usman or Islam Makhachev level. It better be on that level, or Charles Oliveira level, because if you don't, then overall, once again, you might pay the price for it. And Gilbert Burns is also another guy to where, you can tell that he's never really been taught proper boxing. He doesn't work well in with the jab. He throws his strikes pretty much from left field when it comes down to it. He's another one of those strikers like a Wanderlei Silva striker, where for those of you who don't remember the Axe Murderer, he was trained a lot mainly in Muay Thai, I believe. And Wanderlei Silva, he was known as one of the most wicked fighters of the day during the Pride time. And he definitely was. He definitely was a very dangerous fighter. But eventually, especially, once he started facing certain guys in the UFC, now to be fair, he had taken a lot of wear and tear, so I'm not going to completely just say it was that. But when he faces elite strikers, you could see that Wanderlei Silva, at least when he could not use his Muay Thai or get him in the clinch, his punches overall were very wide and very sloppy. He was not a very clean striker, at least in terms of his hands. And Gilbert Burns, I'm not going to say that he's quite as sloppy as what Wanderlei was, but it's very similar. Gilbert Burns throws a lot of his stuff from left field, and overall, he leads with a lot of hooks. And, I'm not saying that you can't ever lead with a hook, especially if you think that they're going to run right into it. But oftentimes, more than not, you're not supposed to lead with the hook, especially from that left field. And Gilbert Burns, I don't think was ever taught that. I don't think that he was ever taught, overall how to properly get in on his opponent, at least with certain strikes. But because he's such a great athlete, and on top of that, he has great grappling, a lot of the times he's been able to get away with that. But it is what it is. And of course, as for, the last fight, or the other fight that I'm not talking about, Petr Yan. Petr Yan, of course, used to be a beast at the 135-pound weight class. I think that personally that he's the better all-around fighter than that of what Aljamain Sterling was, and even potentially that of Sugar Sean O'Malley. But Petr Yan, in my view, I still think that his best days are more than likely behind him. I don't think that he's ever been the same fighter ever since his 2 losses to Aljamain Sterling. And he should have won that Aljamain Sterling fight, because he was completely kicking Aljamain Sterling's ass in that fight. Because I think that Petr Yan is a better all-around fighter, a better striker and wrestler than that of Aljamain Sterling. But in the first fight, he had an idiot move, and Petr Yan overall, once again, he's had lapses, and his corner They've had brain lapses in certain fights where they've done an accidental illegal move. This is not the first time that it's happened in other fights overall, to where there was an illegal knee or something ended up happening. And of course, Aljamain Sterling, some may say that he milked it. Some may say overall that it was legitimate. Either way, Petr Yan was not supposed to do that, and they were supposed to know the rules about that. So that was a major brain fart, and unfortunately, sometimes, you know, overall, that can really cost your career. Like, for those of you, you know, not to switch it over to another sport, but, you know, for those of you that remember Chris Webber, like in basketball, you know, for him overall, I believe, you know, calling a timeout, I believe that's what it was, or, you know, overall, whatever that happened, he was never able to get past that, you know, in the championship game. And he pretty much was remembered and known for the rest of his career as a choke artist and someone that had mental lapses, you know, throughout big games. Petr Yan is a guy to where he's a great fighter, but a lot of the times, especially in some of those bigger fights, he just has mental lapses. It is what it is. I've seen it in both Aljamain Sterling fights, because in the first fight he blew it. When he was completely dominating him, he blew it. He gave Aljamain Sterling, you know, the way to get out of that fight. You know, he pulled an illegal move. And then, of course, in the second fight, he ended up blowing it because he underestimated Sterling, I think, a little bit, especially in the grappling department. And Sterling, I thought, just pulled out of that fight, probably 3 rounds to 2. You know, it is what it is. You know, I thought he got robbed against Sugar Sean O'Malley. I thought that he won that one. And then, of course, against Merab Dvalishvili, I believe is his name, the Georgian fighter, he ended up getting dominated. But, you know, that might just be because, you know, that dude is also another very dangerous fighter to fight. But we'll see where Petr Yan goes. But he also comes across as a fighter that just is not the same to me. And a lot of the times after they lose a fight like that, or multiple fights, they're not the same fighter. Petr Yan still looks better than, say, what a Tony Ferguson does right now. But in terms of, you know, being back to his old self, I just don't see that ever happening. He doesn't come across to me as the same fighter to me. And the older Petr Yan, when it comes down to it, in my view, he really should have dominated this guy more than what he did. But he just doesn't come across to me as the same guy. And on top of that, he's always had a problem at times with his offense, at least finding certain openings. You know, at times he can be super aggressive, and then other times he's a little bit too lackadaisical for his own good. And that also cost him the Aljamain Sterling fight. But it is what it is. Anyways, that's pretty much about it for my UFC 299 fight reviews and fight breakdowns. But I love this card. I thought that it was a great card. I believe that there was multiple finishes on here. Definitely for the, definitely for Dustin Poirier. I think that the Gilbert Burns ones also was a stoppage. The other ones I think were decisions. But great fights nonetheless. Great fights. Even on some of the undercards of the prelims. So great fights. But anyways, that's pretty much about it for today. And then, of course, the other big card is going to be UFC 300. So we'll see what happens. But anyways, that's pretty much going to be about it for today. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.